1 second.
Socially distancing.
No, still not used to being moved. Did he say we were ready?
He said he's.
And we should be live now.
All right, I'd like to call the Board of Supervisor work session to order. And this is for a report from Thomas Jefferson Area Community Criminal Justice Board. Mr. Neil Goodlow. Neil, you should feel privileged today. You actually get a full 30 minutes instead of your 5-minute jail time limit. So,
which I always exceed.
yes.
By the way.
So, and unfortunately, we'll not be able to exceed today because we do need to start our regular meeting promptly at 5.
Plenty of time for what I have to say. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you again. My name is Neil Goodlow. I'm the criminal justice planner for 8 jurisdictions that make up the 2 regional jail authorities of the Albemarle-Charlottesville Regional Jail and the Central Virginia Regional Jail. Our board was established in an effort to create more cohesion among all of these different jurisdictions and how they address criminal justice challenges regionally, because it has become increasingly apparent that crime travels. There are a number of crimes that are committed in this county by residents of other counties and vice versa. So whatever we decide to do as jurisdictions to help control crime trends will only be partially effective unless we have our partners on board from other jurisdictions. So that is essentially why my job exists. I'm here today to present you a first of its kind study. I was tasked by our board as part of our new strategic plan to create a series of annual reports, one for each of the 2 regional jails, which I have done and I have presented to the jail boards. But I was also tasked in creating jurisdiction-specific reports that contain data that is unique to each county, or in the city of Charlottesville's case, the city. So what I'm going to be presenting to you this afternoon are the results of a 10-year survey, actually 9-year survey of Central Virginia Regional Jail data. And that data begins the day that their new jail management system was turned on in 2011. So I have 9 solid years of data, all collected in the same place, all collected in the same way. Everything I'm going to show you today is at least indirectly related to cost, which I know is always a big issue with boards of supervisors. So wherever possible, I will show you how that connection relates to cost. The first of those is simply your general population of your county, which grew fairly substantially, up 10.34, which I believe was the second highest of any of the jurisdictions that I served, the highest being Louisa County at a little over 12%. Louisa County and Orange County in many ways are very, very similar in terms of population size, usually within just a couple hundred citizens of one another. So I've made an attempt to try to create rates per thousand wherever appropriate to factor in this increase in the general population. The first component that contributes to your jail cost is the rate at which crime occurs in your jurisdiction per 1,000 citizens. So this controls for your increases in population, and there are 3 different areas in which the Virginia State Police capture crime data. The first of those is a category called crimes against person. These are violent crimes. They are mostly felonies, although simple assault is also included, and you can see that you've had an increase per capita of 34% over the last 10 years. On the bright side, your crimes against property, and these are offenses such as larceny and fraud and embezzlement and credit card theft and things of that nature, have dropped substantially, down 38%. One of the recurring themes in this presentation will be the impact of increases in narcotic seizures have had on your jail population. And you will see that crimes against society, which are largely dominated by drug crimes and weapons charges, in addition to internet pornography, prostitution, a couple other categories. Those are up 53% per capita over the last 10 years. You will notice, however, for all three of these, particularly the third, there's a tent-like structure to the trend. It rises to 2005 and then starts to trail off again. So keep that in mind as we move forward.
Are these trends similar to what's happening nationally?
Yes, and I would say that's particularly true among smaller jurisdictions. Nationally, crimes against person are down, crimes against property are down. I don't know what the national statistics are for crimes against society, but they probably aren't down as sharply. The issue is large jurisdictions had such high crime rates 30 years ago that they had a lot of room to fall. As opposed to a place like Orange County, which has a fairly low crime rate to start with, there just isn't that much room to squeeze out additional reductions in crime rate. And it's super true for counties like Nelson at 14,000, Madison at 13,000.
Just a question on your chart there for crimes against society. I just want to make sure I'm reading it. It appears to me that 2010's rate mirrors 2019. Is it true that we are back to the 2010 rate?
Correct. However, I want to caution making year-to-year comparisons, given that the numbers are small enough that there can be considerable volatility from year to year in the data. And this is particularly true for narcotics crimes at 6, 7, 8, 9 per thousand, and less true for property crimes because they're committed more often. And I'm more comfortable with that trend line than I am at a trend line where we get down to 6 or 7 incidents per thousand people.
Well, and that was the next point I was going to make. It's the number is 6, and it goes, 53% is at 8. So is that all of the movement that we're tracking? Is it literally that?
It is, but
one person
you will soon see the kind of ramifications that 6 to 8 has for your budget. As Mr. Crozier's already painfully familiar.
No, I understand. It's just, when I first saw the number 53% increase, I went, my goodness. And then I realized that was 2 people.
So this next slide is real numbers. So this is a completely different source. This is not state police data. This is from the Virginia Forensic Science. And the Department of Forensic Science is responsible for taking in samples of drugs that are seized in jurisdictions, analyzing the drug to certify that it is indeed an illegal narcotic, and if so, what type. It's important for 2 reasons. One, it shows us a significant 505% increase over the last 18 years, again with that spike in 15 and another little spike in 17. But the trend is undeniably up, and even when we factor in a 40% increase in the general population over those 18 years. But here's where the DFS data is even more enlightening. It's the first chance that I've ever had to see the kinds of drugs that are fueling that increase. And you can see from this graph the onset of the opioid epidemic in your jurisdiction starting in about 2012. And that epidemic started with prescription opioids. There were then changes made in the law as to who could obtain opioids and under what circumstances medically, which created then a market for heroin. Heroin then supplanted prescription opioids as the most commonly seized felony narcotic in Orange County. And then very late in the cycle, it comes the appearance of fentanyl, which is just a very, very, very powerful form of opiate, far more powerful than heroin. and far more deadly. Just an aside, in some of the counties that I serve, methamphetamine is number one. It's number one in Nelson County, it's number one in Albemarle County. It is number two in Greene County. So there is a geographical discrepancy between drug of choice, which I find interesting, but I think you ought to be on your toes in terms of what may be coming in terms of methamphetamine. That's the only reason I bring it. Now we turn to booking data at the jail. First, just some descriptions of the difference between a booking and an intake. A booking is a charge. If I get arrested for B&E and grand larceny, that's two bookings. It's one intake, but it's two charges. So bookings are a really good way of looking at what and how many, and not necessarily who, right? Does that make sense? Your booking volume's up 34% over the 10 years. When I control for your 10% thereabouts increase in the general population, your booking volume per thousand is still up 24%. Unfortunately, the booking volume for felonies is up almost twice that of misdemeanors. So this is another factor that feeds in to ultimately your cost equation. Not only how much crime is being committed, but also how effective is law enforcement at actually making a case, and how effective are prosecutors in terms of prosecuting a case, and they're both getting more effective, which is good. But it has its ramifications for how many people end up arrested and in jail, and particularly the felony level. So here's one of the few comparisons I'm going to make with your member jurisdictions at CVOJ. You will notice 10 years ago, Louisa booked about maybe 20%, 15% heavier booking volume than did Orange. And somewhere around 2013, those two tallies crossed, and the actual trend lines crossed. So today, Orange County accounts for over 30% of all booking volume at jail, and Louisa is down to about 25%. Another key factor in terms of how much you pay into the CVRJ authority is how other member jurisdictions utilize the jail. Because there are a lot of sunk costs of the jail that can't necessarily be reduced by all that much just because there's a reduction overall in the inmates, which there is not. It's an interesting finding that bookings of white people were up more than twice those of black people. Both up, but bookings of white inmates up 46% compared to 18% for black inmates. And men getting booked a little bit more often than women are, but not statistically significant. So this is a really nice way of showing you the volume of who's coming in the front door. These are the top 10 charge categories using VCC codes. And some of these may be a little difficult for you to understand. So I'm going to read them from left to right and from highest booking numbers to lowest. They are probation violation, narcotics, larceny, DWI, fraud, assault, operator's license, alcohol, contempt of court, and obscenity charges. More on that later, because they differentially impact the bed day expenditures at the jail, depending on how serious they are. Another way of looking at booking volume is to separate felonies from misdemeanors by category. And what I want to draw your attention to is, again, this tent-shaped booking pattern for drug felonies, with the highest years around 15, 16, 14. But I also want to draw your attention way over to the right-hand side to felony probation violations, which have experienced exponential growth in booking volume over the last 10 years. And by the way, I want to give away the secret. But a later slide will let you also know that these are your most expensive inmates. Because there are not only more of them over time, but they tend not to be bonded. So they sit while they await their probation violation. The good news is the number of actual people being taken into the jail in Orange County for charges has dropped over the last 10 years. 2%, but it's still a drop. Meaning the same number of people are coming in as were 10 years ago, but they're coming in on more charges, particularly more felonies. I need to understand more about that. I don't have an adequate explanation for why that is, but I need to look at it. And in fact, when you look at your intakes per 1,000 residents, given your increases in general population, you have a fairly sizable decrease in the actual number of people who are being taken into the jail on Orange County charges year over year.
It
And
seemed to me we're only dropping 2%. In terms of the population went up 10 and the intakes went down 12. You only really got a small amount there.
yes, in terms of real numbers.
Yeah, in terms of numbers we have to pay for.
But you also have 10% more taxpaying citizens, I would assume, in the county to help haul the freight.
Bill, one question, when you were talking about this, with the number of people, have you done any age comparison over the years to see if the age is actually increasing every year? Is it these people that we've had starting back 10 or 11 years ago, and with recidivism, they keep ending up back there?
I have a couple slides coming right up which will answer that question, and it's a very interesting question. Significant differences racially in intake patterns. Far fewer Black inmates, down 15%, and an actual increase in intakes of white inmates over the last 9 years. And unlike your booking volume, you actually have 16% more females coming into the jail and fewer men over the 9-year period. This is also a national phenomenon. Jails are increasingly female. When I was a probation officer 25 years ago, you didn't have 10% of the jail. It was your average daily population in jail of women, and now they're approaching 20%. So the footprint of women in jails has been increasing virtually my entire career.
You think you're the cause of it?
I doubt it. I hope not. So here we start looking at age. And I don't see a connection in orange between advancing age and increasing booking volume. And I find this interesting because I found exactly the opposite to be true at the Albemarle-Charlottesville Regional Jail, where the fastest growing inmate cohort is not only people over the age of 50, but people who are committing felonies over the age of 50. Your big trouble spot looks like the folks in their 30s to early 40s. I will say that both ACRJ and CBRJ experience the same phenomenon with younger people. And you can see 26% fewer people between the age of 18 and 24 got booked in over that 9-year period. And that, I hope that bodes well for the future. So your average age at intake up a little. At ACRJ, it was up almost 9%. And of course, an aging jail becomes a more expensive jail, not just because you have more people in it, but because they require more care, more expensive care. And as you have found out a couple times very painfully, when they have to go to the hospital and you run out of your line item in the CDRJ budget, they send you a bill. I am not surprised by this finding at all. The number of bookings, as in charges per intake, increased 43% over the last 9 years. This stands to reason if you're booking more felonies that you're going to have fewer people hang on. It stands to reason that if you have more bookings for felonies, they generally come in bunches, beginning at grand larceny. 3 counts of distribution of narcotics, assault on 3 different people. As opposed to a DUI, it's going to be generally 1 charge. The other thing that doesn't surprise me is that your pretrial release rates are down 23%, meaning more people held pending final court action in their case. Again, when you have more felonies, and particularly more serious felonies, you have lower bonding rates, many times because the magistrate is bound by regulations at the Supreme Court level to presumptively hold people who meet certain charge definitions. So now we get to maybe one of the most painful pieces of this story. The average length of stay of an inmate who's Orange County responsible has gone up 63% in the last 9 years. So even though you've had a 2% reduction in the number of people coming in, they're staying longer. They're staying considerably longer. The longer they stay, the more they cost.
How is that trend compared to the other jurisdictions?
It's a really interesting question, and I'm studying it right now. The average length of stay at ACRJ dropped 24%. The average stay at CDRJ increased 28%. So they're going in opposite directions. Even though a lot of the underlying features of their data sets are fairly similar. And I don't have an explanation for that, but I have an inkling. I'm doing some work now with age and length of stay, and length of stay bins by changes in how long somebody's staying at each bin. At ACRJ, there have been substantial reductions in the number of people staying 180 days or longer. And at CVRJ, there appear to be increases in that same category. And make no mistake about it, that is 180 plus inmates that are costing you more than anybody else. It's just mathematics, right? You gotta have 365 one-day stayers to equal a single person who's staying a year at $90.90 a day. Almost no difference between average length of stay increases among blacks or whites. Your female inmates had a 115% increase in their average length of stay over a 9-year period, which is almost twice that of men. Your average length of stay was up across every single age group that I studied. And so all this adds up. Take the number of inmates coming in, multiply by how many days they stay, That produces an average daily population at the jail and a bed day expenditure at the jail, which are identical metrics, just explained in different ways. They're both up 49%. But what this means is that you spent, in terms of inmate days at the jail, Orange County spent 49% more at $90.90 a day than they did 9 years ago. So you're not just paying more because the jail's more expensive, especially after the building of the expansion of the jail in 2016. You're paying more because you've got more inmate bed days being expended. And this is true even when we adjust for your population growth. So you're up 38% when we factor in per capita. You're still behind Louisa though. Louisa is the #1 bed expender at the jail by percentage. And since you're almost exactly the same size, they are more bed day intensive than you are, which affects your bill. They end up paying more. You end up paying a little less. And especially if you look at the last couple of years, you were on a downturn. The jail bills you based on bed day expenditures over, I think, a 3-year average. So if you can keep this line heading down in comparison to the other jurisdictions, even though it's going up, then you're probably going to pay less than they do as part of the formula. Another interesting feature is that your white inmate bed days were up 70%, almost 3 times the increase in bed day expenditures among your black inmates. And your female bed days up 107% compared to 53% for you men. Again, bed day expenditures up across the board, regardless of age group. And if you want to know where your money's going, this is the slide right here. This shows you the number of bed days associated with each charge type. And over there on your far right, you see felony probation violations that have just exploded in terms of their bed day expenditures over the last 9 years.
You have any additional information to put that in some kind of context?
Well, I think if we go back to the first couple slides we looked at, I think a key contributing factor is the opioid epidemic, which has been visited upon this probation population. And since they're being drug tested regularly, it doesn't take too long to catch an addicted person violating their probation. Consequently, your bed day costs went up 173%. Combination of more bed days expended and just the increased operational cost of the jail year over year. Salary increases, new roof, addition to the jail, all kinds of medical expenses, all of that. And factoring in your bed day costs per 1,000, that's up 148%. So that's about $70 for every person in the county per year. And that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Neil. Any questions or comments?
Is there anything that you could think of in terms of activities or investments or counseling, whatever it is that would attack any of these things in terms of either keeping them out in the first place or better people with parole violations, better monitoring of them?
So punishment alone will not get it done. We need a significant investment in both alternatives to jail to start with that keeps people in the community and allows them to receive treatment that might help them alter their behavior patterns. Whenever consistent with public safety, at times it won't be. And we need to make significant investments in not only their supervision, but in terms of the kinds of substance abuse and mental health care that would be of a sufficient dosage to help people change behaviors, which in many cases have been very long in developing.
For those with mental health problems, we're hearing about the Marcus alert system that's being that's working. Any possibility that some of these could be diverted into mental health things as opposed to the jail?
So I've been working for the last 6 years with the University of Virginia Systems Engineering Department. And we have developed an extensive database using ACRJ inmates because we have that data. And we have determined that on an average day, as many as a third of the inmate population meets the screening criteria for serious mental illness. A third. They tend to stay longer, they tend to return more often, they tend to return for longer lengths of stay, they tend to cost more. And we are attempting to create alternatives in Charlottesville and Alamo County. We created a therapeutic docket. And of course, we've had a drug court for 20 years. These are ways of giving people structure, accountability, but at the same time, some intensive treatment resources that are not available to your rank and file probation. And I think my colleagues who are coming after me want more to say about that.
And if, quite honestly, if you have more questions, we can have Neil back at a future date. That's fine.
Happy to do it.
Because, otherwise, we'll be here at midnight when you start asking Neil questions.
That's true. Thank you so
I
much.
really do appreciate it, Neil. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Mr. Chairman, Keith has a question.
Go ahead.
I am just curious, being that these opioids are a large factor in your population, is the source of these opioids coming, or are they being subscribed in the county, or are they coming from outside the county?
I have no way of knowing that. It's a great question. I mean, ultimately, I think they're being produced elsewhere. The question is what do the distribution networks look like, and are there people actually coming in and selling street level in Orange from somewhere else, or are there people actually Orange County citizens who are engaging in distribution? I think it's probably both, but I don't have any data to support it.
You good, Keith?
I think he is.
Okay, thank you. All right, our work session is concluded. Then we'll need a break before we begin the regular meeting. All right, at this time, I call the Board of Supervisors meeting to order. Join me for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next would be the adoption of the agenda. I have no changes. Does anyone else have any
Mr.
changes to the
Chairman,
agenda?
If we can just have Mr. Marshall announce his physical location since he's joining us by Zoom, that would be great.
Yes, ma'am. Keith, could you tell us your physical location, please?
South Carolina.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, if there's no changes to the agenda, I would look for a motion to approve. Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, next is special presentations and appearances. Mr. Voorhees, I believe you have the introduction of our new Planning and Services, Development Services Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't really see behind the screen here, and maybe there's people in the hallway, but it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Josh Gillespie to you. Josh, are you in the hallway, the audience?
There he is.
There he is.
Yes.
That was a theatrical entrance. And as the staff member who's likely to spend the most time on stage, it's only appropriate. I'd like to introduce Josh to the board. He hails originally from South Carolina, from the upstate area, which in many ways is reminiscent of the rolling hills of Orange County and the foothills. And so I think Josh has told me how he feels at home here. And I'm really excited to have him. He's most recently been employed by Chesterfield County. They know a little bit about planning and development in Chesterfield. You may note that they have some of that going on. So we're kind of excited to have Josh's experience come here and help particularly guide us as we are looking at what's going on in the Route 3 corridor. We got a very large application coming in any day now, and having somebody experienced to help us with that will be certainly advantageous to us. So Josh, would you like to say a couple words?
Sure. Thank you, Ted. Members of the Board of Supervisors, I want to say, as Ted said, I do feel very welcome at home here. People of Orange are warm and welcoming themselves, and there's a very interesting transect from east to west, north to south in this county that appeals to me greatly. I love the plan that's been developed and adhered to really for a fair amount of time to send the growth and development in the east, protect more of the rural character in the west. The people of Orange have a great heritage and history here. I'd love to be a part of that. I'm thrilled to help you all in my role, and I look forward to meeting you, all of you, and getting to know you. So I'll be calling on you, and please, I encourage you to call on me in the coming weeks, since actually none of us have talked at all yet. So I'm looking forward to those conversations.
You didn't tell him much about us, did you?
Didn't warn him.
That's right.
It's only day 2, right? This is your second
That's
day.
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. It feels like day 1 over again.
Very good. Well, welcome, Josh.
Thank you, sir.
Look forward to working with you, and I'm sure you'll spend some extra time with Mr. Johnson. He's the liaison for the Planning Commission.
Josh was at the last planning commission, virtually, of course. And so he's already gotten a bit of a trial by fire there. So
Very good.
Well, we got a big complex project going on down at the eastern end of the county, so
You came on.
you'll have your
just in time.
challenges there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, I look forward to all of those challenges. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Josh.
Well,
Now, do you exit the same way, or?
he was given a time limit.
That's it, exactly. So, thank you. Next is our business spotlight. Jason Cashell. Don't believe.
Yes, he's
There we
here.
are. Okay. I'm used to everybody.
there's a queue out there.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome, sir. Come right up to the podium.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for having me. My name is Jason Cashell, and my wife Casey and our 4 kids. We moved here in February from Louisville, Kentucky. And growing up in small towns my whole life, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, this is the best small town I've ever lived in. So thank you guys for all you've done. We just are thrilled to be here. So we run Mayhurst Estate. Mayhurst Estate is a hidden gem, as most people I've heard say. And unfortunately, we don't want it to be a hidden gem. We want everybody to know about it because it is a great property. It's probably one of the most historical properties in Orange. James Madison's great nephew, John Willis, is the one who built Mayhurst in 1859. It was before that, it was the Howard Place. And one of the great things about it is also Judge Hiram Bond, who was the judge of Orange County, lived at Mayhurst, and he was the one mentioned in Jack London's book called The Wild. So there's lots of historical facts about Mayhurst. National Geographic did a dig there about 13 years ago. And so we're doing some things with display cases inside the house to show that. We're doing some things on the land to improve the land, to expand it. It's 37 acres currently. And we also have the hopes of having a retreat center there. It's currently a bed and breakfast as well as a wedding venue. And we just want to expand it into being a retreat center as well, where artists can come from different places and have retreats there. And so, again, we're just excited to be here in Orange, and thank you guys for your time. And we look forward to being here for the rest of our lives. So, thank you, guys. Any questions?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. All right.
Waiting in the back there now.
Next is the Life Saving Awards. Is Chief Mort hiding out there? I believe he is.
Whole bunch of people out there.
Chief Mort is here and Mr. Voorhees has the narrative for presentation.
Very good.
May I introduce somebody?
Please do.
I want to introduce Ms. Aro. She is the actual patient that these first responders brought back in November. So it's a huge honor that she's here with us today.
I'm only here because of them.
Very glad to have you. Mr. Chairman, board members, I'll read the synopsis here and then we'll hand out the awards. On Wednesday, November 25th, 2020, a call was received by the Orange County Emergency Communications Center for the sudden cardiac respiratory arrest of Amy Sorrow. Communications officer Jeremy Brown administered telephonic CPR instructions to Ms. Sorrow's friend, Jaden Rodriguez, until responders arrived on scene. Lake of the Woods firefighter EMT Simon Gray was the first to arrive and began administering CPR on the patient. County of Orange firefighter EMT Chris Barrett and firefighter medic Noah Madden arrived and provided advanced life support protocols and resuscitative measures. Duty officer Captain Mark Sikora was also dispatched to the scene and, while en route, coordinated a medevac helicopter to arrive at Sweetbriar Park for transport. Lake of the Woods Chief Mike Cianci was on scene and assisted with CPR, scribe duties, and incident command. Once Ms. Sorrow was stabilized and loaded in Medic 29 for transport, EMT Gray and Lake of the Woods firefighter Thomas Lilly staffed Engine 29 and responded to Sweetbriar Park to provide landing zone support. Officer Tabitha Hensley and Chief Scott Walker of Lake of the Woods Security also provided support at the medevac landing zone. While this may have been, quote, just another day on the job, unquote, for these individuals, their quick service, training, and heroic actions directly resulted in saving Ms. Sorrow's life. It is with great pleasure, Mr. Chairman, that we present these life-saving awards.
Jeremy Brown. Oh, you want me to cut? Oh, we gotta do photo ops.
Okay. We're smiling, really. You just can't see it.
So Jeremy Brown, he was the 911 operator that took the call. And he also instructed Mr. Rodriguez on proper CPR techniques. So congratulations, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everybody's taking notes, right? Next, I'd like to actually call Jaden up. So I think it's amazing, you know, in CPR, when we teach it, we talk about this chain of survival. Chain of survival starts with somebody noticing something's wrong and then starting CPR. Jaden did that. Jaden was the reason we had a chance.
Oh, hey, babe. Everything okay? Oh, shit.
It's good, babe. So Jaden actually came in, you know, we do this for a living. Jaden doesn't do this for a living. And I just want to really recognize Jaden.
Thank you so much.
And I don't know if you got a uniform, man, but I'm giving you a ribbon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And one of our challenge coins.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Challenge score going to be with us today. He is taking us on the hockey. Chris Barrett is in paramedic school right now. So oh, he made it. All right, come on in, Chris.
We need a picture, the three.
Yep, we do.
Get him over here.
From what I understand, Mr. Jaden's been very humble about this experience.
Very much so.
Christopher Barrett, came in on medic 29. Noah Madden. What's that? No. Noah Madden was the ALS provider on the call, so Noah started all the advanced life support. Good.
This is more pictures than a dance recital, isn't it?
Really? Chief Fiance? One of the amazing things is, for those that don't know, this was a coordinated effort between County One Fire and EMS, Lake of the Woods Volunteer Rescue, and Lake of the Woods Security. Simon Gray. And we're just gonna make him talk because I love his accent. See, she wants to hear it too. I mean, we both had our shots.
I'm vaccinated now.
And Mr. Thomas Lilly with Lake of the Woods Volunteer Fire and Rescue.
Yep.
Again, thank you all for what you did. Jaden, don't be so humble. What you did is amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Chief, I'd like to, if it weren't for the pandemic, I'd be down there posing and shaking hands with everybody, but I just want y'all to know how honored I am to be in any way associated with everyone. This is just a classic example of how coming together, playing your part, everybody acting as a team can do what we set out to do, which is to improve the lives and save the lives of our residents, citizens, visitors. You're all to be commended, and I'm super proud of every one of you. Thank you so much for your great service.
Good. Thank you very much. Amazing story. Yes, it is. It's nice to see those occur. All right, next is presentation from the Montpelier Foundation. Mr. Roy Young, President and CEO.
Yes, good afternoon.
Welcome, sir.
Nice to see you all. Kara Sisson is here with me, our Chief Advancement Officer. I'm to understand that we'll be joined by Jim Hare on Zoom from the Department of Historic Resources.
Mr. Hare, have you joined?
Yes, I'm with you from afar.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure where we should start. My understanding was that Mr. Hare was going to be presenting on behalf of the Department of Historic Resources. I'm certainly happy to give a brief overview of the project that we'll be talking about today. That would be to your benefit.
Yes, if we could start there, that would be wonderful.
Okay, great. So we have a project at Montpelier that we applied for state appropriation for called Culture, History, and Memorialization. That project was conceived back in the late teens, the late 20 teens. It was proposed in the 2018 budget, I believe, first. It was funded in just this last year's budget. The appropriation is for $1 million. And the project really has three main components. Those components are research, discovery, and memorialization, education programs that we'll host on site, and public programs that revolve in and around the Constitution. Now, the original project team was James Madison University, the state, the Descendant Committee, and Montpelier Foundation. That was changed, is my understanding. I was not here then. I just arrived in April at Montpelier. My understanding was that the state's requirement for the appropriation is that it be passed, the funds be passed through Orange County. And Mr. Hare is joining us to explain a little bit about that process and how that took place. Jim, would you like to jump in?
Sure thing. This is a situation that was set up essentially by the General Assembly. It's unusual in that this grant program, which formerly would transfer funds directly from the General Assembly to the project applicants, which in this case is the Montpelier Foundation and its partners. That process changed a number of years ago, and it requires that the funding be passed to the local government and then from the local government to the applicant. So that added an extra layer of unfortunate bureaucracy that my agency, the Department of Historic Resources, has been pulled in to help mediate and hopefully alleviate any extra burden that it might pose. What it means for the local governments, and there were 10 grants made by the General Assembly around the Commonwealth that are responding to this situation. What it means is that DHR is obligated to take this money from the General Assembly and transfer it to the local government by the end of the current state fiscal year. In other words, June 30th. The transfer of that funding requires the signing or the execution of a memorandum of understanding between the applicant, Montpelier Foundation, the Montpelier Descendants Committee, DHR, and Orange County. Once that's done, DHR would electronically transfer the money to Orange County, which then is essentially acting as a facilitator for the project without any direct responsibilities in terms of managing the project, monitoring the accounting or the supervision of the work. That's DHR's job. But what we need the county to do is hold that money. And then when DHR authorizes the county to release money to the applicant, Montpelier Foundation, that you do that. And it's really no more complicated than that, but it is a bit of an unusual situation since it involves the county as a partner essentially in the project to help facilitate these fiscal responsibilities.
Out of curiosity, why is it, what was the General Assembly's idea of taking state money, passing it through a local jurisdiction, and then for all practical purposes, then passing it to the federal government?
To a nonprofit.
The federal government that has created a nonprofit. That's where I sit a little baffled. I don't understand. Any idea what possessed the General Assembly to create this particular path?
I really can't speak with them other than the explanation that was provided by the Office of the Attorney General. The change that was made when Mr. Cuccinelli was the Attorney General a number of years ago, I believe that was going back to 2009. At that time, he offered an opinion that the transfer of funding from the General Assembly directly to a nonprofit was in violation of the Constitution of the Commonwealth. that was just an opinion. It wasn't an official ruling, but that set in motion the procedure to require local governments to be involved to receive the money from the General Assembly and then pass it through to the applicant, whether that was a nonprofit or a university or what have you. Unfortunately, not being part of those conversations back in the day, I can only relate that that's the system that we've inherited. And as I said, the Department of Historic Resources is involved only to help facilitate the pass-through of this money to the applicants so that they can get their projects done.
Thank you. Did you have any more, or are there any questions?
No, I have some comments. I don't have any questions, but
I guess comments would be the best.
Actually, the question, I think it's just a technical one, but I heard, I think both of you say that Orange County would be expected to hold the money until they were notified to release it to the foundation. Is the foundation the actual responsible party in DHR's view? I mean, there's several different players.
Right.
And I'm just trying to get, someone has to be held accountable for performing according to the terms of whatever agreement.
That is the Montpelier Foundation.
Is in place. And that is the foundation. Okay.
That's correct
So
in terms of DHR's understanding.
All the money would flow to, or at least through, the Montpelier Foundation.
That is correct.
That was something that was unclear from the MOU. It looked to me like it wasn't, had not yet been established as to where the funds would.
Happy to clarify that and make that statement more clear in the MOU.
At some point, the Madison Family Descendant Cemetery was mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
How are they involved in this, or because I know that they're a separate entity?
That is true.
From Montpelier.
The Madison Descendants are an organized group, and the Descendants of the Enslaved are an organized group. So there are two separate groups. This does not actually involve the Madison Descendants, except for the fact that we communicate openly and clearly with them. But it's not sort of their project, if you will. We'll be working directly with the Descendants of the Enslaved, so that's the Montpelier Descendant Committee, and they will be really advising, consulting, and they'll be equal partners with us in many of the decisions that get made, especially that beginning piece I spoke about under research, discovery, and memorialization. As you might imagine, many of the individuals buried there are related to people that are involved in this project with us. And so there's a very close family tie there. We've been working for 25 years with the descendant community as part of our work at Montpelier. And the reason we used the term whole truth history at the beginning of the presentation and the proposal was specifically to highlight that we have a Madison era history, we have constitutional history, we have the Descendants history, and we also have the DuPont history. So a significant amount of history that we think is important to educate the public on around our work.
Just one more question, again, a little bit of clarification. As I understand it from reading this, the private match is a requirement of the terms of the grant. And I guess my question goes to how does that get managed, monitored, and the like? For example, let's just say that you invoice on a monthly basis, just to make it simple. Does that match have to be achieved with each invoicing, or is it only at the end? And how is it monitored? Because I didn't see anything that told me the administrative process or the assurances that would be part of the release of any funds. And I'm concerned from the county's perspective here that we get, you know, the kind of guidance that we need in terms of releasing funds. And if a match has to be checked at the time, or how that counting is done. Has that been worked out? I didn't see that in the MOU itself.
It has been worked out, but interestingly, there's been some changes. So I'll give you sort of the answer that was first before us, which is that we'll raise $1 million over the course of the next 2 years. That was the agreement because it was a 2-year-long project. And so there are not significant thresholds through invoicing or through percentage completion of the project, although we will be responsible for funding everything above and beyond the $1 million that we receive from the appropriation. This project will likely come in closer to $2.5 or $3 million. So we will continue to raise funds even beyond the proposed match. But I'm to understand from the Department of Historic Resources through the governor's office that match has been modified. Is that true, Jim?
Yes, that's correct. And this is a development that just happened within the last 2 weeks. It was a significant problem, particularly for some small nonprofits around the Commonwealth that had received grants for projects that varied in scope from rehabilitation of small historic schools to various other things. Unfortunately, the General Assembly, when they were working with their constituents to obtain these grant funds for them, did not understand that at the time, the way the state code was written, a match would be required. The only reason that match would be required for this grant program was that alone of all the agencies in the Commonwealth, the Department of Historic Resources, because of its other programs involving rehabilitation of physical historic structures, has had programs that required a match. So in state code that was implied. This was something that the agency did not realize and the General Assembly didn't realize. So due to the...
I'm confused.
Yes, I know it's confusing, but because of COVID, the release of these fundings got delayed to the point that when the Special Assembly came around and the funding was confirmed, many of the recipients were shocked to realize that the good news of receiving some money came with an unfortunate message that they needed to match it either dollar for dollar or dollar for dollar in kind. So it was alarming for them. And while DHR did not have anything to do with establishing that policy, we understood that it needed to be ameliorated in some way, or many of these projects just couldn't go forward. So having worked with the governor's office, that budget amendment was hammered out so that the requirement to have any type of a match was removed. And for the larger institutions such as Monticello or Montpelier that are receiving grant funds, as was just mentioned, it's not really an issue because the cost of their project is far above and away what has been awarded by the General Assembly. So they've got their own operations in play to raise that additional money. But for some of the smaller projects, they were scrambling to figure out how they would be able to find a pot of money that ranged from about $50,000 to $200,000. And for some, it was just a deal killer. So that was the change. And in terms of the accounting that needs to go forward, the county and DHR will only be concerned about the monitoring of how the grant funding is being expended, how the money is being spent to advance the project in that regard. It makes the monitoring of the project for DHR much simpler. As I said earlier, there's no requirement on the county's part to have to monitor or approve expenses as a partner in the process. Of course, out of courtesy, you're entitled to see exactly how the money is being expended, and that accounting would come forward to you along with our request for release of funds when DHR makes that to the county.
So, but ultimately, we are acting as an arm of the General Assembly as one of their accountants.
Yes, I think that's an appropriate way to phrase it. We deal with situations like this in the nonprofit world more regularly, where there might be a fiscal agency established whereby a preservation organization such as Preservation Virginia would act as a fiscal agent to help monitor funding for a small grant recipient who might not have the expertise in managing grants and doing the types of financial and project reporting that's required. So many times that type of fiscal agency relationship is established when grant funds are released to an applicant. This situation is just a little bit different in that if everyone had their druthers, the local governments wouldn't have been called in to help facilitate it all. But that's the way it transpired down in Richmond.
Any more questions, Mr. White? I understand. Mr. Marshall, any questions?
Given the removal of the match while he's getting online, does that alter the project in any way, either from the foundation's perspective and what you want to do, or from DHR's perspective? I mean, does DHR now want to focus their monies on particular aspects of the project, or is it a fund that's generally available for anything that you're doing that's part of this project?
It's generally available, although I would tell you the three parts of the project that I identified, the research, discovery, and memorialization, is certainly the first piece, because we have to properly understand exactly the parameters of the project.
It looks to me like, one of the reasons I asked the question is, it looks to me like that piece takes the entire, could be used for the state monies entirely. I mean, that adds to roughly the $1 million, especially if you have a little bit of program evaluation or administration on top of it. So.
The good news is that we have a very well-established fundraising department, which Kara heads, and the project, to answer your question directly, does not change for us. We will be matching those funds from other foundations, from private individuals, much as we would for any fund, and they would be restricted to this project, just like these funds are restricted to this project.
So matching and exceeding from what you said.
Correct. That is correct. I would say that some of the newer language in the MOU, which I think you have in front of you, very clearly states what Mr. Hare did in terms of the county not having any responsibility in terms of.
I don't think we have
that.
Please allow me to read what the most current draft says. Local government will serve as fiscal agent for the project, release grant funds to the co-applicants upon receipt in writing of DHR's notice of approval for payment. The local government bear no responsibility for reviewing or approving the co-applicant's application materials, reimbursement requests, or performance of compliance with the terms of this MOU. This responsibility is fully borne by DHR. The local government is not one of the partners and thus is excluded from all responsibilities assigned to the partners elsewhere in this MOU. The local government serves strictly and solely as a funding conduit for the transfer of grant funds.
With no compensation should be written in there, from my understanding.
So I did ask that at the beginning of this process many months ago, and was surprised to hear that that was the case.
That's probably the most unfortunate thing about all of this.
I would agree with you.
We're being required to do something.
I would agree with you.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, I don't think I don't see any point in belaboring this. This is very clear cut to me. This is ridiculous. The state has caused this, and I don't think the state even knows why. I think the state has tripped over itself over the last 10 years, and it appears to me nobody really understands why they're doing it the way they're doing it. It's just because 12 years ago, an attorney general issued an opinion that's not even binding. And this is not an analogous situation where you say, well, the federal government can't do this because that's reserved to the states. Local government is a subset of state government. We are part of state government. We're not allowed to do things the state isn't allowed to do.
Right.
I wished we were. We can only do a small number of things that the state says we can. So, I mean, this is illogical from A to Z. It just makes no sense at all. And I mean, the state needs to change this. And I don't think they really need to, I don't think they need to pass any laws, because I don't think there's even a law that requires it now. So I would request that we, in amongst our legislative wish list that we will be presenting to our legislators, that we add this in there, that this be changed at the state level. Because it's unfortunate. I don't even know who to be upset with. I'm not upset with Montpelier. I'm not upset with the fellow from DHR. I don't know whose fault it is unless it's Ken Cuccinelli. I don't know where he is right now. So.
Are there any, as for Tom, are there any other areas where the state has to fund things through the localities that the localities have nothing to do with?
No, I agree with Mr. Johnson, and we only can do what the state tells us we can do. To say we have power that they don't have does seem ridiculous.
That just seems that if you're dealing with this particular DHR, there may be some others that say, okay.
All right. I mean, we're strict Tillings Rule State. Any power we have is because the state gives it to us.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Would the Montpelier Foundation be interested in any input from the county in regards to how maybe this money could be spent?
Yes, is the short answer. As we were going to end, I was also going to open an invitation to the group to join us on site and to be part of this project if you would like to. We feel strongly that this project will drive note, that it will drive tourism, that it will bring additional people to our site, which in fact brings many, many people to the region in terms of the economy. And we really feel that Whole Truth History is our moment going forward to make sure that our site is relevant. And so all of those things, sort of our prosperity and your prosperity is very closely intertwined. So yes, I would invite you to participate, and I would invite you to our site, and I would invite you to be as active as your time would allow you to be.
How can we maybe arrange a mechanism in which we can review some of these money expenditures?
Well, I think you could certainly review the expenditures, but the budget will be very closely tied to the application that goes into the state, to DHR. And so I would imagine that the process would be that those needed to align with the original budget for the project.
From what I saw in the budget on this money being spent, part of it was for re-education of children and retraining of police. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you explain a little more how Montpelier Foundation can retrain police?
Sure. We have 3 existing modules through our Center for the Constitution. And I'm not clever enough to remember the 3 names of the modules, but they are a well-established training program for public servants and for law enforcement officers And we currently are working with DCJS to develop a new module. And we've done so with the help of a well-known PhD student out of Harvard who helped us with one of our last programs and has done pretty extensive evaluations. And we've just piloted sort of the third of maybe 6 modules. And what we're hoping to do is we're hoping to teach these modules not only through the Center for the Constitution virtually, but through continuing to bring law enforcement officers to our site to be able to really experience our history and the power of place. And so we would be very happy to explore how the county law enforcement officers could be involved in this program. It's gotten very strong reviews, and I would say the pilot project that we just had the end of last year actually had 3 different individuals responsible for training at the state level for law enforcement officers.
You train people from foreign governments as well, don't you?
We have in the past through the presidential precinct, and we share our constitution and the formation of our constitution with those individuals so they can think about how they might do something similar in their home countries.
Hopefully.
All right.
It's a good program if you want to go through it. And actually, the modules are online now. Pretty interesting.
If there's nothing else, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you all.
That's right, thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure the same. And if you could make sure that we do get that updated language.
Yes, absolutely. We'll make sure that Glenda gets it directly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next is presentation on drug court coordinator from the Honorable Judge David Franzen. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. And remove my mask.
Absolutely.
Thank you. A little hot in there.
Good reading helps.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board for this opportunity to discuss with you our hope to begin a combined drug court program for Orange and Madison counties. My name is David Franzen. Allow me to introduce who I think you already know, Ms. O'Connell, the Commonwealth's attorney for Orange County, Robert Cunningham, Deputy Commonwealth's attorney for Orange County, and Katie Fitzgerald is the one of the assistant Commonwealth's attorneys. They've all been very involved in working on establishing a drug court, and I've asked them to accompany me today in the event you have any questions I cannot answer. Allow me first to express my appreciation for your restoration and modernization of the historic courtroom and courthouse. Not only will that enable us to resume jury trials in this pandemic, but I believe they will be a source of civic pride to the citizens of Orange County for years to come. I especially want to thank Mr. Voorhees for his help and guidance throughout that process. I am the presiding circuit court judge in both counties, and I will have the responsibility of ensuring the drug court is operating efficiently, effectively, and in accordance with state law. Mr. Goodlow's excellent presentation is an excellent segue into the value of drug courts. Drug courts have been around for years, both nationally and in Virginia, and empirical data demonstrates that not only reduce recidivism and save localities money, they are also effective in combating the scourge of drug abuse and addiction, some of which I've heard about from Mr. Goodlow. Planning for the Orange Madison Drug Court began in early 2019, and in July of 2020, a team of law enforcement personnel, substance abuse treatment specialists, probation officers, prosecutors and defense counsel, myself and others within the court system met for a 3-day training session with representatives of the Adult Drug Court Planning Initiative sponsored by the National Drug Court Institute. Since then, our team has met twice a month to draft our policies and procedures manual, develop our participant handbook, and to crystallize the processes we intend to implement once the program begins. When fully operational, we expect to serve up to 20 new participants each year. Once nonviolent drug users, and I want to emphasize that as drug users, not sellers, are identified and screened, the program consists of 5 graduated phases, going from very intensive supervision and random drug screening to less intensive supervision and screening until the participant phases out, we hope successfully. The average time spent in the program for each participant is estimated to be between 16 and 18 months. Individualized service plans will be developed during the initial assessment to ensure that no cookie cutter solution is implemented for each participant. The drug court itself will meet weekly, presided over by myself, and participants, depending on their phase, will attend court as much or less often. Full reports will be prepared and reviewed by the full team prior to each participant's court appearance. Successful completion of the program will result in either a dismissal or reduction of the criminal charge, depending on the nature of the offense, the participant's prior record, and other relevant factors. What I'm asking from the board is not only your words of support for this much-needed drug court program, but the allocation of funds necessary to hire a drug court coordinator. We've gotten to the point in our work where it is clear that a coordinator is necessary to liaison between the many organizations and agencies that will be involved in a successful program. This includes treatment providers from the Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services Board, Offender Aid and Restoration, the Commonwealth's Attorney's offices in both Orange and Madison counties, Myriad Defense Counsel, me as the judge, clerk's offices in both jurisdictions, funding sources, such as the Bureau of Justice Assistance with the United States Department of Justice, local employers, food assistance agencies and food banks, child care services, and medical providers for other than substance abuse and mental health issues, and the list goes on. This coordinator will of necessity be a full-time position. I'm asking the board to consider allocating a percentage of the estimated cost of the position less than proportionate to its population compared to Madison County. The total combined population of Orange and Madison counties is, according to the latest figures I have available, just shy of $50,000. $50,000, 73% of which reside in Orange. I respectfully request that you allocate 2/3 of the $60,000 we estimate needed to fund the position, or $40,000. We're asking Madison for $20,000. I ask that you consider funding at that level for 3 years, dependent upon our being able to demonstrate to you and to your satisfaction the effectiveness of the program. Thank you. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Question for you. The one thing I did not hear in there is, well, what I did hear is this would be a weekly court.
Correct.
Is the court going to be separate time frame than the other courts?
Well, I will be presiding, and it'll be set at a certain time every week, set aside outside of my regular docket.
Okay. The reason I ask is when it comes back to funding, are there going to be additional court deputy hours required?
No.
Okay, so it would fall under your normal judicial schedule.
Regular hours.
Okay.
Yes.
Then that we would not have any increased transport time from the CVRJ because these people would not be in there, correct?
That would be my expectation. Certainly the reason that they would be, there's an assessment process. An individual who is in the drug court program essentially stipulates the sufficiency of the evidence against them to the offense. So we don't have to go through a trial. They're saying, I agree that the Commonwealth has enough evidence to convict me. The matter is put off and deferred. A person enrolls in the program, is engaged in life amongst us, as it were, not in the court or in the jail population, which of course, as Mr. Goodlow indicated, would be a significant savings to the county. You don't have those $90.90 per day costs to keep these folks in jail, because what we're trying to do is address the underlying problem. I can tell you that in my time as a circuit court judge, many of those probation violations are just what Mr. Goodlow indicated. They are drug offenses. And if the drug offenses are driving the conduct, then what we need to do is address the underlying root causes. If we can solve those problems, then we reduce the recidivism, we keep them out of jail, we make them, or we give them the opportunity to be constructive, contributing members of society. And not only are they taxpayers, not only are they family men and women, not only are they raising their children, but they've defeated, hopefully, and the drug court programs have been very successful.
I just want to make sure when we're allocating money that we do not overlook if there's going to be an increase, because obviously we provide certain monies to the sheriff, and then if he's asked to do more, he's going to come back and ask us. So,
I understand very well.
okay, I want to make sure that we get out in front of it instead of, oh yeah, maybe we should have said something about that. So just wanted to make sure we get in front of that.
What are the range of crimes that they would end up in drug court as opposed to?
Well, I mean, as I say, it's a probation violation. It could be, they've already addressed whatever that crime is. If the probation violation is the use of drugs, for example, one of the things that I typically will sentence a person to in a supervised probation situation is that they remain drug and alcohol free. So if they are tested periodically by their probation officer and they come up with a positive test, drug screen, they have violated probation. And then they are typically arrested, they're placed back in jail. Now, if you're talking about an initial offender, we're talking about non-violent drug offenses, there are other felonies which a person could be enrolled in the drug court even though it's not a drug offense. There is a underlying drug problem that has driven that offense. But it's not the charge that they're facing.
So he might have a breaking and entering charge or something like that, with which the penalty is probation, which enables you to then deal with the drug issues.
That's one way of looking at it, yes, sir.
Second, the availability of treatment and counseling, that's a pretty tight field these days in terms of having enough. So you've handling maybe 20 with all the other things. Does the Community Services Board think they can handle that kind of a workload in terms of the treatment and counseling, whatever they're going to need?
The members of the Rappahannock Rapidan Community Services Board have been working on our team. They are part of our team. They have been meeting with us every other week.
So they feel they can handle this workload. Okay, because I know that's I hear from the Community Services Board, they're always looking for providers and counselors, and just are shorthanded on this a lot.
Well, I think that I would say that it would be misleading of me to say that there's enough treatment providers to go around. There never are. Then there's always going to be a pinch. There's no question about that. I think that's just the nature of the profession, the problem we're dealing with. But they are on board with this, have been members of our team, and are very active, and in fact are quite excited about the prospect, because if they take those 20 and they are able to actually help them solve their problems, help the patient or the participant solve their problems, well, that's 20 less than they're going to be dealing with in the future.
Sure.
So just to make sure I understand completely, and I'm talking about a first offender here, if someone, for instance, was arrested for shoplifting, but it was determined that they were shoplifting to feed a drug habit, would that be something that would be eligible for this?
Certainly.
Okay.
And let me correct you on one thing. They're not necessarily first offenders. These may be folks who have offended repeatedly, but whose underlying drug problem is the motivator behind the criminality, the criminal conduct. So it may very well be that the assessment team will determine that that person who has a number of offenses in their background is nevertheless appropriate to engage in the drug court program to address that problem. And so those repeated problems won't repeat themselves.
When somebody, let's say, uses drug, they're in this program, and they are found a drug test finds positive. Does he immediately go back to the Huskow, or does you have to evaluate each situation on its own?
Relapse is a part of the process of drug addiction treatment. The anticipated relapse is something that the drug court program takes into account. They don't move through the phases. What happens is that if a person relapses, either they are stuck at phase whatever it is, or they go back a phase. That is to say, they go back to more intensive supervision, more intensive or frequent random screens, et cetera. But if there is a repeated failure to comply, then that we have a graduated way of dealing with that individual up to and including their exclusion from the drug court program, which then gets them back to the point where they have stipulated the sufficiency of the evidence and they just simply go to sentencing. So there is a significant advantage to the person who is seeking to participate in the drug court program, given that if I don't comply, if during the course of this intensive supervision, I continually test positive, then I'm just going to be back where I was before with a conviction, which I don't want. And besides, not only don't I want the conviction, I don't want the addiction. When I'm speaking with these, and I don't mean to speak to with the authority of the treatment providers, because I certainly don't have that. But the sense I have from them is that people who are addicted do not want to be addicted. They want to be free of drugs. The problem with addiction is it keeps them from that ultimate goal. And that's what the drug court program is designed to do, is to assist them to achieve that goal.
Mr. Marshall, did you have anything?
No, I'm good. We're good.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions of either I or, we've got plenty of statistics. I got statistics if you, but I didn't think you'd want to probably have them, but at any rate, we can certainly provide them at any time with regard to.
Actually, I would like to see them. I wouldn't want to take the time now, but if you could forward them to us.
I'd be happy to. We'll make sure we get to the statistics too. All right.
It appears that you're defining fairly broadly the candidates that could participate in the drug court process. And speaking of statistics, as I look to Mr. Goodloe's presentation, one of the last slides he gave us on the orange bed days. If I look across the charges, there's drug felony, drug misdemeanor, traffic DUI, alcohol minus DUI, and then of course the felony probation. If I just sort of visually put all of that in the candidate pool for drug, that is a huge percentage of the bid days that we're experiencing. And so it seems that a broad definition in terms of at least initial eligibility for someone to participate is a key factor. And I think that's what I'm hearing you say, that you would propose that this not necessarily be open to all comers, but broadly speaking would be available to but characterize that if you would for me.
Well, I think the way we envision this is that potential candidates would be identified from a variety of sources. I could identify somebody as a judge. I could say, look, I think this person is a good candidate for drug. Commonwealth's attorney could identify a good person. Defense counsel could say, my client is a good candidate for this. So that the identification of the individual. Now, whether that person ultimately is recommended for a drug court consideration will probably largely come down, we're still kicking this around, but largely will come down to the Commonwealth's attorney. Commonwealth's attorney will make a determination as to whether this person, given the characteristics of this offense, given the characteristics of this person's prior record, variety of other factors that would be relevant to determine, would then say, yes, this person would be appropriate, and then they would be assessed. Then they would be actually assessed by a a substance abuse treatment counselor to determine what is the nature of their drug problem. Is this a problem that the drug court is designed to address? Can we make a difference in this person's life? Now those are all very much treatment criteria and not so much a criminal justice criteria. You know, it's not just a matter of identifying the conduct, it's also identifying the treatment criteria and the amenability to treatment that would you've got to dovetail what the drug court can do. Because it's not a one size fits all. It's not going to be able to solve everybody's particularized drug problem.
That decision lies with you, if I heard you correctly. The ultimate decision,
Well,
based on recommendations coming from
that's right.
other sources.
That's right. Ultimately, that's correct.
These are generally non-violent offenders.
Yes.
How soon could this be set up and running?
Well, it depends upon how soon we can get our drug court coordinator on board. But, you know, I'm assuming that that person is up and qualified, and obviously we wouldn't hire anybody who wasn't qualified. I would think that we could probably do it. We've got a Supreme Court application which is pending or hasn't yet been filed, but will be filed pretty shortly. That's a standard for drug court requests. We've got a funding request with the Department of Justice, but I'm thinking that we probably could, maybe Ms. Fitzgerald can speak to that more clearly. I would guess certainly 3 to 4 months would be a possibility.
I believe so. We're starting small. We want this program to be scalable, and we want the scope to be something that we can grow in as we've got the success. It's okay if I take the mask off. What we have envisioned and what we're putting forth to the Supreme Court and also to the Bureau of Justice Assistance through the DOJ is that we would have a cohort in place of the number of appropriate eligible candidates. We're believing we could start our cohort as soon, if we have a coordinator, as soon as, say, September. And it is, again, it is riding on the shoulders of some other agencies who not only have had the experience with Charlottesville and Savannah, but also people who are willing to do in-kind service. Nobody is getting paid extra to do this at this point, and we want to make sure that we use the resources, and as we go through it, that we're able to say, for example, functionally, there are no local services for mental health here. We have to find people to get there, and the problem is there's no local transportation. So if everybody has to go to Culpeper or Charlottesville, we immediately shoot ourselves in the foot because transportation is not possible. A lot of these folks have lost their driver's licenses, so they would be breaking the law to get themselves to treatment, which seems spiral. One of the things that we found out in researching the grant administration, 58% of our children through DSS that are placed in foster care are placed because they are coming from a substance abuse and or mental health family. That seems like an extraordinary number of innocents that we are not addressing. And I think if you look at the long-term numbers, and Mr. Billow no doubt has something to this effect, children who are placed in foster care for long periods of time, we're not giving them the opportunities that, that they need. So it is a multi-generational issue, and we believe that we can start, everything starts with a small step, right? We believe that we can start a cohort September, but we do need to have a few more foundational things in place prior to that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Real quick, one more time, Sheriff always likes to come and ask us for money, and I understand that, absolutely. Sheriff, do you have any other?
He answered my question. The only other question I asked Diana was, will we be taking on cases from Madison County here in Orange? Will that not add to the docket to make it, I'm assuming?
Well, I mean, it's certainly the court for Orange Madison Drug Court will be here in Orange. This is where it will be conducted. And so there will be people who are resident of Madison who will be coming here to participate in the drug court. But that doesn't mean that that there are any particular additional strains on our court system
The
either.
only reason I ask that is I know the juvenile court, it does add strain when they come from other jurisdictions because we're here a lot longer.
Right.
I'm very well aware of that.
Okay. I don't, we have it on record that.
Process, we were getting through it.
All right. Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Diane.
Thank you
Everybody
all
else,
for your time.
you take care. Right, consent agenda,
Motion to approve.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. New business, Mr. Voorhees, the Louisa Community Development Authority for Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to crank through this pretty quickly. This is a presentation on what is known in the vernacular as a CDA. I'm just going to mention to Josh, who's out in the hall, you can certainly come in and have a seat now that the room's cleared. And this is relevant to him as well, because really this whole presentation, which I already went through with representatives from the Wilderness Crossing project. This whole thing is really just a quick, informative sharing of information about how some large land use projects have been financed when it comes to dealing with significant public improvements. And so we'll go ahead and just crank through it. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to look over here because I can't read very far away.
Sorry.
So community development authorities. Does your monitor just go out on me too?
It's coming back.
There it goes. So the history, the CDA Act was enacted in Virginia in 1993. Over 35 states, it's more now, have been kind of using this authority. The first one was formed in 98 and was used to develop Dulles Town Center in Loudon. And there have been quite a few done since, as of a decade or so ago, over 19 have been done. So what is it? What is a CDA? It's really a financing tool for local governments to partner with private sector to deal with infrastructure or services that the underlying local government wouldn't be able to do without it. So you create a separate authority for the geographic area you're trying to deal with. You use a voluntary special assessment district at the request of the developer. So it's really the developer realizing they don't have the financing they need to do certain things. And so they want to ask the locality to use its special, legislative authority, taxing authority, assessing authority to help finance. So it's specifically authorized under the Code of Virginia. There's the code site. That's part of the Water and Wastewater Authorities Act. So the purpose is to finance infrastructure or services within the district. You may issue bonds to finance them, and you can also generate money through ad valorem taxes or assessment on the property. The procedure is pretty straightforward. Cities, counties, and towns can do it. You have to adopt an ordinance. There's a petition process from the landowner. At least 51% of either the land area or the assessed value has to petition. You have to have a public hearing, and then you create it by ordinance. Then, as with so many other entities we create, you set up some articles of incorporation, file it with the SEC, and then you appoint members. It would be much like the Broadband Authority. The likely suspects would be appoint the board itself to be the CDA board. You could appoint others. And then the powers are to acquire, construct, and operate infrastructure and other facilities, Examples, trash removal, street cleaning, water and sewer, security, recreational management, groundskeeping. And you can handle these things, capital improvements, by issuing revenue bonds. They're typically tax exempt. And the locality, we would levy and collect the ad valorem tax on the tax bills associated with the property. You can also do a special assessment, and that could be paid over up to 40 years. You can also collect annual fees if you need to for services. So let's say you had a special level of street lighting or patrolling or something, you wanted to kind of step it up, maybe landscaping, you would do that through an annual fee of some sort. So an example of facilities: roads and bridges, water and wastewater, curb and gutter, stormwater, streetlights, landscaping, security facilities, parks and rec facilities, and fire prevention systems, fire stations, and vehicles. Again, revenue bonds are issued by the CDA, not the locality. So they're payable from a pledge of the special tax. Only sophisticated investors buy these, so they know what they're getting into, and it's depends on the loan ratio. Kind of depends on the level of development. So that's just kind of a piece of how those are structured, and they can be combined with the special assessment. So you don't have to do one or the other. You can kind of target the funding strategy to the service or infrastructure you're trying to pay for. And this is a key that I think we'd all like a lot. It's not a debt of locality, so it doesn't eat into your limitations on bonded indebtedness. You're not pledging the full faith and credit of the jurisdiction, and they don't obligate the locality. Again, the three revenue options are, as I mentioned, the real estate tax, the special assessment, and I want to highlight this third one. Tax increment financing can also be set up in this way, and sort of that's where you evaluate the revenue impact of the development. After the development, you're going to have higher tax value, and so if you sort of carve that off the top and use that to finance, pay the debt on how you got there, that's the increment, that's the tax increment. You can pledge that as one way to do this as well. And you can use all three. This is mostly just repeated clarifying. Special tax creates a lien. It survives bankruptcy and sale, so you don't have to worry about not being able to pay back the notes. The assessments are not an ad valorem tax. That's more uniform. So again, you can target as you need to. That can go up to 40 years, and that's it can be assessed differently based on the relationship to the benefits. So, for example, you could have a special assessment on commercial property that has a higher level of street sweeping and street lights, and maybe security people who go around and help customers and make them feel safe and all that. But then the residential area nearby doesn't have those things, so they don't get that special assessment. But it's all within the CDA. And then I mentioned the tax increment piece, which is just another strategy. One reason why people sometimes like that is to say to other homeowners, hey, look, we're only going to use new revenue on this thing, so you don't have to worry about it eating into the base taxes that people pay. So the benefits, you can finance without general fund money. The costs are realized by or paid for by those who realize the benefits the most. Typically, it's tax exempt financing, so you get a really nice rate. It allows upfront financing for development, so the developer doesn't have to sit around and wait to sell a lot of lots before they have money to do things. If you have a big master plan project, particularly something under single ownership or just a few owners, you can really leverage that and do build a lot of roads and water and sewer and infrastructure. That can really get something to a project to jump off that may not otherwise be bankable. And again, you're not obligating the full faith and credit. It also gives you some flexibility to add services or build things later on because you've already got a ready financing mechanism in place for that district. Here's a list of examples, some that you may be familiar with. We mentioned Dulles Town Center. Chesterfield has the Watkins Center, which is familiar to me. It's kind of right off of 288. And then there's a number of parts of short pump that are done this way. You've probably all driven through some of these areas that had a high level or what you might call high quality development and wondered how they came to be. And in a number of cases, it's through a CDA. So I just wanted to put that on the table. I've mentioned this to our Wilderness Crossing developer. They'll have to come to you and say that this is how they might want to finance some things. But I didn't want it to be, something we hadn't surfaced. We don't know how much of that project the developer plans to finance through conventional financing or any of the phasing, but this does create an additional option, and I just wanted to make sure the board was aware.
Do we know whether the CDA revenue bonds can be part of the VRA pool or not? Because one of the concerns I would have is the size. To do a revenue bond, if by itself, a standalone, it gets fairly expensive. The issuing cost gets very expensive unless it's part of some large pool. But I don't recall from looking at this several years ago whether they can be part of VRA or not. It'd be interesting to find that out.
Great question.
That gives a lot of flexibility if it can join a large pool like that.
Great question. We'll research that. I don't know the answer to that.
When I'm thinking about a project maybe so much as big as we're looking at the GWAP, can you do this in phases? In other words, if I try to build all the infrastructure with the first bond issue, and then the developers' growth in terms of businesses and residents coming in turns out to be slower, then you find yourself in a situation where I've committed a lot of, it would seem to me that if I'm doing this, that I want to build, the minimal that I can right away, so that I can start paying it and not be stuck with a huge bond servicing costs, such that if the development doesn't proceed as I originally planned, and very few do, you don't want to get yourself overextended. So it would seem to me that this is something you would say, all right, I'll do a little bit here, and then I will have another issue that finishes the other things, and move that in a progression, so as not to find ourselves in the situation, at least one other jurisdiction that we're aware of.
That's where the incremental definitely comes into play.
That's exactly right, and that's why you have, in fact, the board itself needing to meet from time to time to kind of track the progress of the projects and then push things out or pull things forward depending on.
Yeah, as I said, it's a part of actually a plan. Well, I'm going to do this, and this is, and in 3 years I would expect that I would be at a point that I can now do this, and those might be separate bond issues, or so I'm not paying servicing on something that I'm never going to get any revenue for 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
Keith, did you have anything?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Voorhees. Next would be a resolution to appoint the zoning administrator and subdivision.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, now that Josh is here, he has the pleasure of stepping right into the line of fire on 2 of our critical functions. That is the zoning administrator and subdivision agent function. Of course, he has some staff to help with the day-to-day, and I'm sure that that will continue. But this is a formality to make it clear that he has the authority set out in code to handle those functions, and so I would recommend that to the board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Oh, God, I second it.
All in
I thought you
favor?
were seconding.
Aye.
Uh,
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Josh.
You are now doomed.
Yeah, congratulations.
All right, I see no old business. I see no department director, constitutional officer reports. Mr. Latchman?
No comments.
Mr. Voorhees?
Just one comment, let the board members know, I had another call today with the sort of regional working group out of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission talking about regional cigarette tax implementation. There's some conversation at the RRPDC and there's some conversation at the TJPDC. It looks like the TJPDC is now starting to think that they may go forward with some sort of regional approach where the PDC sets themselves up as an administrative agent. They would have to presumably invite others to join them since we're not in that PDC, but they seem, at least the working group seems so inclined. They did do a pro forma on revenue. I'm sure that it's not necessarily, the most accurate, but it's an effort, and they're thinking possibly $300,000 to $350,000 a year in revenue for the county. That's not insignificant. It's getting close to a penny on the tax rate. So I just wanted to be transparent with the board that I'm continuing to participate in that, and I think the next step will be to draft a resolution of interest for any board that may want to pursue this, just to have you adopt something that says, hey, we are interested, so they can kind of get a head count of who might want to be part of something like that. And then that gives them some, just better idea of how many folks might be involved and what kind of volume would be of the work. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Any questions at this point? All right, moving right along, board comment. Mr. Johnson?
Just great, very good to see you.
Going well, sir. We're going to start District 1 this evening.
I don't everything at the moment.
Okay. Mr. White?
Nor do I.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any board comment?
No.
Okay. Mr. Frank?
Yeah, I've got a couple. How many of you are aware, maybe you already are, that the General Assembly has set aside $36 million to build the new Health Technology Center down at the Locust Grove campus at Germanic Community College. And with the timeline that Dr. Gullickson put out, would be starting construction sometime in the summer of 22 with occupancy sometime in the summer of 23. So that's a nice addition. Second comment is I participated in a Zoom meeting on the Marcus alert system. That is something where you try to identify situations where you have people in either substance abuse or mentally challenged calls that go to the 911 center, and trying to not necessarily deal with everyone with a sheriff or a deputy, and it's the kind of thing that you say, all right, the call comes in, maybe you can send it isn't a dangerous situation, you can send in a mental health professional, or you have to send in a sheriff, but he needs a mental health professional to go along. And then there's a whole series of treatments and where do you send it? It's a pretty long process. They're going to be meeting twice a month until in December, and the state is doing the same thing. I know that Jason Smith was the sheriff's representative on that. And he expressed concerns, and I'm sure that most law enforcement officers do have concerns. Where is the role of the mental health professional there, and how is this all going to fit? And so they're trying to develop protocols and procedures, and it's going to be a challenge, I think, over the next year to try to put that together. Anyway, I'm sitting in on some of these sessions just to sort of see what the potential financial impact is. Plus, as chairman of the VACO Steering Committee on Health and Human Resources, there may be some elements that we want to feed back into the legislative process.
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right, informational items. No questions. Next would be appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. We have the Rappahannock Emergency Medical Services Council. Mr. Moody is interested in continuing to serve.
Move to reappoint him.
Okay, and then we also have the District 3 Library Trustee, Ms. Wilbanks, is interested in continuing to serve. Mr. Marshall, like to make a motion to reappoint her? Or would anyone else?
I will.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't pick up on that.
Oh, okay. And then there's also a rotating at-large vacancy. Jennifer Porter is interested in serving on.
Do you know which district she's in?
District 3.
District 3, right.
Okay, now we also got this afternoon.
Somebody from District 5.
Yes, no.
But I think that Ms. Porter has been on the list for a while.
Okay, well, then this one is from District 4. The one we got today, I believe.
Oh, no, it's District 5.
Oh, it is 5, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm saying she just
Right.
requested, and Ms. Porter's been on there for a while.
Okay, so you would.
I would
support her again?
Yeah, I would.
All right, all in favor, are there any other appointments? All in favor?
Was Ms. Wilbanks, was she not interested in continuing?
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is.
I just
She
appointed her since you weren't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what we asked.
I wanted her to retain that seat if you wanted it, right?
Okay, yes, Zoom is no fun.
Thank you, Mr. Frank.
All right, all in favor?
I need somebody to cover me every once in a while.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. They are reappointed unanimously.
Allison, could you have in contact with Mrs. Richardson to see if she wants to continue?
Of course, yes, sir.
Talked to her a couple times recently, but I didn't realize her appointment was coming up.
And I didn't want to reach out to Mr. Soderquist yet on the PWN board without direction either.
Next is calendar. I believe at this point, both 13A and B are scratched.
Yes, sir. They need to be struck. The planning commission deferred and tabled action respectively on those matters. So we'll bring them back after planning commission makes a recommendation.
All right, very good. Next is the public hearing, the rezoning 21-01 is.
We have John Craig, who is one of the applicants, and Ms. Thornton joining by Zoom.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Craig. Ms. Thornton, go right ahead, please.
All right, good evening. This is an application from Top One Enterprises LLC to rezone property at 12731 Gordon Avenue in Gordonsville from general residential R2 to agricultural in order to cultivate crops for a pick-your-own operation in addition to a craft brewery, farm winery, and recreational space. Property is identified as tax map parcels 68A1-2-1-17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 39, 40, and 41. Maps 68A1-2-2, 23, 42, 43, 44, and 45. And parcel 68A1-2-3-46. The affected property contains approximately 6 acres, something over 6 acres, and is situated in the town/suburban recommended future land use category as described in the Orange County Comprehensive Plan. Planning staff recommends the concept presented in this application and recommends approval of the petition as a conditional zoning based on proffers submitted, which would restrict the agricultural uses permitted. I would like to note that the applicants will be required or would be required to demonstrate that they are operating a bona fide farm, which would be a minimum of 5 acres, generating a minimum of $1,000 annually from the sale of agricultural products in order to operate as an agritourism venue. The area where the property is located is characterized by a mix of residential and agricultural uses and open space. And the site, which, as you know, is the former VFW site, is approximately a half mile from the strip shopping area in the town of Gordonsville. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to go into the staff report as to the extent that you'd like, or move to summarize the Planning Commission action and recommendation.
Let me see if any board members have any questions that they'd like you to go into more depth on that. It's rather comprehensive paper report that we've gotten. Does any board members have any questions on the staff report? Okay, go ahead on with the rest then.
Okay. This matter had been scheduled for the Planning Commission to open their public hearing on February 18, and due to the weather, that hearing was canceled. The county's legal staff had indicated that they believed the public hearing could be conducted on March 4th, since our original advertising for this had contemplated Planning Commission action on March 4th. And of course, all the necessary public notices had been accomplished. So the Planning Commission's public comment period, as advertised, did extend to February 23rd. And we noted that no public comments had been received. Some of the application review committee comments referenced conversation with some nearby property owners, but we did not receive, for the Planning Commission's hearing, any individually submitted public comments. I would note that Commissioner Cashell expressed concern that the applicant's presentation to the Planning Commission occurred subsequent to the close of the comment period, and he urged interested citizens to submit comments during your public comment opportunity. At the Planning Commission's hearing, the applicants indicated that their concept plan had been revised somewhat based on comments that had been received by way of our county review process, and also by way of their own community contacts. And that revised plan was included in your package. There was considerable discussion at the Planning Commission meeting about the potential for visitors to the venue leaving the property and accessing adjacent private property, since walking trails are proposed. And the applicants had noted that there is some fencing in place now, and they suggested that there would be sufficient natural barriers as well as signage to deter people from leaving the proposed walking trails. They also, in response to a comment in the staff report, they also indicated that they have no plans to increase lighting, and that any replacement lighting would be dark skies compliant. As I indicated, staff did recommend conditional approval. Mr. Cashell moved to recommend approval of the rezoning with the conditions as proffered. Mr. Hutchison seconded the motion, which did carry unanimously. I would point out that the proffers did include a restriction of several or elimination of the possibility of several current by right uses, including the keeping of animals customarily raised on farms, places of worship, and cemeteries or graveyard. And they offered to eliminate the possibility of all of the special uses currently available in the agricultural district, or potentially available, but 3. And those 3 that would be retained would be cultural use, commercial recreational use, and a restaurant accessory to an agritourism operation.
I have a question. Yes, Mr. Wood. Sandra, I noticed that one of the by right uses that was eliminated was which numbered 15, which deals with a retail store not exceeding 4,000 feet and a farm stand greater than 1,000. Is that problematic given that, I don't know the exact characteristics of the building that's being proposed, but could it be at least alleged that that was a retail store of some type or a farm stand of some type? I'm just a little concerned that we don't.
I think it's covered by other things that are allowed, like a farmer's market with 4,000 square feet.
Okay, so
there's like multiple things in here, and they've kind of gone through and picked out some, but left others. I was actually just going through to pick up everything that was left, and because I had that same question. But
yeah, I just want to make sure that we weren't putting him in a place that he didn't want to be or didn't need to be restricted. But if there's
he's still allowed to have a restaurant, a commercial kitchen, temporary sales, and a farmer's market up to 4,000 square feet, and also something called a farm enterprise.
But not a farm stand.
And not in no stock. That's right. No, you can have farmer's market up to 4,000 square feet.
Okay. All right.
I certainly other people can answer, but I mean, I was just going through that process, but to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So there's 38 between the by right, of which there's 15, and the special use, of which there's 23. There's 38 different uses, and they proffered 23 of them. Which, I mean, a lot of those that they proffered, they couldn't do anyway without a special use permit, but.
The ones you were referring to, are any of those special use permits, or are they all by rights? I don't have the ordinance in front of me, so I can recall.
Some of those are special use permits.
Okay, but he's not seeking a special use permit at this time, right? Just the straight rezoning.
Correct, just the rezoning. Yeah, the proffers basically would do away with all but 3 of the uses currently listed as special uses. And as I said, they wanted to retain the possibility of establishing a cultural use, a commercial recreational use, or a restaurant accessory to ag tourism. All of the current by right uses would be retained, other than the keeping of animals customarily raised on farms, which of course is not listed as a separate use, but it's incorporated in the definition of agriculture. And then they propose to restrict the area to a place of worship or a cemetery.
I'm a little, it's a little bit of an odd thing, and I'll address this question to Tom. I mean, can you proffer away potential special uses? You can say, I will never apply for this special use.
Yeah, you could proffer away. You could literally say, we proffer that the only thing we will use this special use for is this particular purpose here.
No, but this is not a special use permit. This is a rezoning.
Right, so I'm saying you can proffer that. You can say the only use that I proffer, the only use we will use this for, and you proffer away all your other uses. Yes, you can.
Even uses that you only can have by a special use permit?
Yeah, you're literally, what you're doing is you're proffering that the only use on the list that I'm going to use is this one, for example, and then that you proffered away all other possible uses in the zoning ordinance. Yes, you can do that.
And I guess that's my broader question. Is that what is happening here? Is that he is proffering away those?
But he's proffering away his by right.
Well, and special use.
And special use, I think.
But he doesn't have the special uses to give away anyway. Because
but he's giving away the right to apply for those special uses.
Right.
I think one of the problems that the constituents have sometimes is they'll look at a rezoning and they'll say, well, this is what's allowed by right, but they can also, once they got that rezoning, they can then apply for the special.
But that comes
for the
back to
special
us.
use.
That comes back to
Well, but
us.
what Tom is saying is they can indeed proffer that way, and I just wanted to make sure, because I don't think I've never seen that before. It may have happened and I was unaware of it, but I just wanted to make sure that it was.
Focus on the last part of it, uses. Whether there's special uses or by right uses, it's the uses that you're proffering away.
Okay. All right, any other board comment or question? All right.
Mr. Chairman, we do have, if you want to hear a presentation
Yeah,
from the
I'm gonna
applicants,
say-
John Craig and Andre Xavier.
Okay. Do either of you gentlemen have anything that you'd like to add?
I believe she was very concise throughout describing our intentions. And in regards to the proffers, we were a little confused ourselves of what we would give away to help alleviate any possible conflict with our neighbors. And so if that's uncommon, we apologize. This is all new to us as well. But we appreciate your time tonight and thank you for the opportunity.
Very good.
No, I don't think there's not any objection to what you did. It was more just a
Yeah.
little unusual, and so it took us a little bit to get our head wrapped around it.
We need
For sure.
All right.
Yes, always. Not just in board meetings.
Yes. All right. At this time, I will open the public hearing and Allison, if you would read our special language.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Because this meeting is being conducted remotely, there is no opportunity for physical public access to the meeting and no opportunity for in-person public comment. However, all interested persons are invited to submit written comments for the board's consideration. Those written comments may be submitted either by mail to attention Allison Simpson, P.O. Box 111, Orange, Virginia 22960, or by email to asimpson@orangecountyva.gov and must be received by 5:00 p.m. on Monday, March 22nd, 2021, as the board intends to close the public hearing and further consider this matter at its regular meeting on Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021, after reviewing any comments they receive.
Very good. Thank you very much, ma'am. At this time, if we're done with that, Mr. Latchman, would you please read for closed session?
Sure. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Orange County desires to discuss in closed meeting the following matters. Discussion, consideration of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of public body with respect to Constitution Highway. Consultation with legal counsel between actual or probable litigation or such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body with respect to RSA. And consultation with legal counsel employee retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters of provision of legal advice to such counsel regarding RSA and conduit right-of-way access. And whereas pursuant to sections 2.2, 37A3, A7, A8 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Orange County is hereby authorized discussion of forestated matters in closed meeting. Need all that as a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. We are now in closed.
Cole, we're ready to pause the live stream.
What are we closing?
Okay, let me go ahead and pause that.